Hello, this is Family Electric Ghost. So we have Angela Wright on the line.
Hi there.
How you doing? Glad to have you back on the program.
I'm so glad to be back. I'm excited.
Yeah, things have changed since the last time we talked. You know, when we talked to you before, you were a 19-year-old artist from Salt Lake City, Utah, and you were in you come from Berklee College. You attended that, and then you gone out to Nashville, and now we're in this kind of situation. But I see you have with coronavirus, but you've got a brand new release coming out, so it seems like you've been able to still keep on moving.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I've been trying to do. I feel like music is one of those outlets for people that can maintain and kind of keep that normalcy for people is while they're home or while they're working, like they can listen to music. And for me as a creator, I can still create and have that be my emotional and expressive outlet. I mean, it's definitely been hard for a lot of musicians out there right now not being able to perform live. So I've trying to take to my writing and recording processes.
So are you still in Nashville, or did you go back?
Yeah, I am in Nashville. I went home for like part of spring. So during the beginning of quarantine, my family was really worried about me. So I did go home for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But my apartment and my life is still here. So I came back to Nashville and just have been writing and working from home and doing that.
Yeah, I mean, during this time, we've been kind of doubling down, you know, as podcasters. We've been interviewing a lot of artists because that's been given their kind of lifeline to their connect to their fans since they can't tour. So,
Absolutely.
so we've been able to kind of do a podcast almost every day.
Good. That's great. I'm glad I can be one of them.
Yeah, it's been really good for us to, you know, it's gotten our name out there. We've been able to do other things because, you know, musicians, we can't play live. So we've been doubling down on our recording like you and working with people. So it's, you know, I think it's weird in this situation. It's such a bad, you know, tragic thing, but a lot of artists have found a way to still be creative in this time. So I think that's good news for everybody that loves music.
Yeah. Hopefully it'll lead to some really great releases because I think this is a time when people can go into themselves and self-reflect and realize like what they want to be doing and what they're good at and how we can adapt in this life of okay, if we're not going to have concerts, what's the closest thing to it, or how can we still relate to people and bring that common experience of music together.
Yeah, we've been doing our part, you know, with the podcast. We started branching into video podcasts. So if you ever want to do that, we can do that as well. Yeah, we've been talking to bands because a lot of the music industry is based on, you know, bands have to tour and they have to do shows because the way we get paid.
Revenue.
But we're finding that artists are finding ways to, you know, collaborate, do sync licensing. They still connect with their fans by doing, you know, all kinds of interesting things like, you know, putting out their own vinyl or doing T-shirts or, you know, doing other things. So have you thought of, besides, you know, doing the recording that you're doing, we're going to talk about your new song in a second. Have you thought about doing like online performances, or have you looked into that?
Yeah, I have been actually looking into that. So I am going to be releasing, after I release this song on Friday, just a couple days here, I will be releasing a video for it shortly after. That's like a live session that was like home here in my house of just me playing guitar and singing to the track, which is exciting. So that's kind of like a live performance, but as well as just like getting on, we'll probably start doing more live videos and like getting on Twitter and all those different apps and trying to reach new audiences, because I think that's my biggest thing as a musician right now is just getting it beyond family and friends and having people who really are music, like who like my music, want to hear it.
Well, I think it's interesting, you know, Instagram has introduced like Reels. TikTok has been really heating up. A lot of musicians are on TikTok.
Yeah.
A lot of people are using Reels. People are using Twitch, like you said. I use Twitch myself, along with Facebook Live, to connect to fans. So I did see on your Instagram some pieces of you working on a project. So is that project the new song Siren Call?
Yeah, that is this new song, yeah, Siren Call. It's kind of just talking to people about the process of writing the song, recording the song, getting the album cover, kind of giving people some insight onto what my process is and what musicians do to get a song released.
I think that's one cool thing about social media. You know, back in the day, because I'm in my 50s, we had like fanzines, like bands that we liked.
Yeah.
Would put out these little newspapers, and you could go to a comic shop or a little smoke shop, and you could pick up some kind of indie, bands putting out their little fanzines. And that's how you connected. And you're like, wow, this is cool because they're telling me about this. Maybe they'll send me a tape cassette of a live performance, or they'll talk about like what they were doing. But now it's so much more, you can get if a band chooses to have that kind of connection to their audience.
Yeah, making it interactive. I think that's a really big part of it, especially while we're all in, like, at home, is like, okay, how can I not only, like, I'm not just giving you this song just because I want, just a song. I want to, like, create that connection with people and, like, hopefully reach people who need to hear what my songs or my music is saying. And so part of that is kind of like with the videos that I'm making is just talking about like what it is to be an artist and what we do, because I think a lot of people are curious but don't actually know exactly what goes into the process.
Yeah, I mean, previously we talked about your influences on our previous podcast, but when I'm looking at your new song Siren, you're still in that kind of zone of Lana Del Rey, Florence and The Machine, Maggie Rogers, and Sasha Sloan. You got this indie sad girl vibe.
Yeah, thank you.
And that's kind of like, I've always been a big fan of independent, female artists, going back to Liz Phair and the Blake Babies, and it was Sleater Kinney. I was always drawn because I grew up like listening to bands like Husker Du and the Replacements and REM. And then what I found is like when Liz Phair hit the scene and Juliana Hatfield, then I was like, wow, there's this other voice. Even Sonic Youth, I would hear it too. But I always was drawn to that because I thought it was just a different way, different people talking and hearing that female perspective when you always were hearing the male perspective in music. And now you have all these like really powerful female singer songwriters. And it's always been a good way to, kind of diversify your catalog of things you listen to.
Yeah. I mean, like, I'll get that because, like, even for me, like, I find myself listening to largely male artists, just personal taste. And I'm like, oh, but I want to cover this song. Like, how cool would it be to do a female rendition of it? And kind of think about those things, which is really fun. But yeah, my influences are kind of there. But it's really fun to hear different people's perspectives. Just even with this new release, just getting like friends' opinions and sneak peeks of it, and hearing like who they think I sound like or what genres I should be targeting and trying to get Spotify features on. So it's been a fun adventure for me so far.
Yeah, well, I love that. Like I said, I'm a big fan of that sound. That kind of Lana Del Rey, Florence and the Machine sound. And just like you, it was interesting. You said you actually tended to listen to male artists. Who are the male like artists that you are influenced by?
Yeah, I love Chris Isaak, Tame Impala, Foster the People.
Yeah, I hear it. Yeah, totally. Now that you name check them, I do hear that in your music. So that's interesting. Hey, sorry about that. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, not quite sure what happened there. I think maybe I walked into the wrong room in my house.
Oh, yeah. The Wi-Fi signal, if it gets low, it'll just drop it. So.
Okay, got it.
But luckily, it saved what we did, so I'll just string the segments together, so we're still good.
Great, yeah. I think I was on a little bit of a rant about, yeah, I was talking about kind of my influences just being all sorts of genres. As far as male artists that I listen to, I love Chris Isaak, Tame Impala. I think he created a wave of music that really influenced a lot of different indie bands, which is cool. I love Foster the People and Coin, and I'm just discovering a lot of new smaller artists as well, that are just local around Nashville, which has been a lot of fun for me.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of discovering fellow artists that are in like a similar boat as me right now, where they're creating music. They're not super famous yet, but they're just on their way and working and grinding and trying to get there.
So I know we talked about your home studio setup previously and what you were doing. Since Corona, have you beefed up your ability to work at home? Have you added new capabilities, or are you still using the same type of gear?
Yeah, when I went home, it was actually very difficult because I was living out of a suitcase for a couple months. So I brought just like my little PreSonus audio box and a little MIDI keyboard. I was like, okay, I hope this lasts me while I'm here. And just use like my laptop microphone for a while, which was a challenge, but it was also kind of cool to see like what environments I could record in.
Yeah.
Like I would go up on the top of a mountain and kind of go sit there and like record ambient noises, and then just do like live session stuff, which was fun for songwriting. But then coming back here, I actually just recently moved into a new apartment. So I got things organized a little bit better. Like I have my big keyboard connected to my computer now instead of just a little mini keyboard that you can't even play fully on. So that's been nice. I feel like I'm just getting it more organized and more set up, but nothing like super upgraded, other than I've switched my DAW to Logic.
We went to Logic.
Yeah.
What were you using before?
Well, so when I was at Berklee, I was using Pro Tools.
Yeah.
Because that's like kind of what most of the classes were on.
They trained on that, right?
Yeah. But I never really got very good at it, and you have to renew it every year and stuff like that. And so I kind of was going to GarageBand as my go-to anyway, because it was the easiest for me.
Yeah. I mean, it works. I've talked to bands that have totally done albums on it.
Yeah, exactly. So I was kind of like, okay, I already know GarageBand's layout, and I've heard good things about Logic. So I decided to go from there on that one.
Yeah, I've just continued my kind of DAW-less recording. I use like Zoom R24s with all my Moogs and Rolands.
Yeah.
And I just found it works for me. I mean, I've played with Ableton, but I always end up defaulting into I used to record back in the 90s on Tascam and Fostex 4-trackers.
Okay.
With like, Roland D50s and old Moog, mini Moogs. And I just I like that way of recording, because I can kind of just do whatever I want. And, people would say, well, that seems more difficult. I find it actually easier.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, because you just kind of keep on overdubbing and bouncing tracks, and it becomes more, like, it feels more organic. It feels more kind of stream of consciousness or like you're jamming. And that's the feel I like to get in my music, so I tend to go that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everybody has their own process for sure.
Yeah, it's just interesting. There's a whole new movement. I've been doing that for years, where you get these DAW-less recorders. Like, now it's become like a thing. But it was just something I was doing because that's the way I felt good about it. But yeah, there's always these controversies. Like in electronic music, it's like, oh, it's digital or it's analog, or it's like a combination of both, or you should go and use a tape, like Neve board based recording versus like all the digital stuff. But I think what happens is, like, you just service the song.
Yeah.
If you need something that's like, like vintage, then maybe use a Hammond B3 or a vintage piano. But if you want something that's more, modern, then you might use something that you get from a soft synth. Yeah. It doesn't really matter. It's kind of whatever's going to work.
Yeah, having that organic sound. I feel that very much. Even like just for me, like when recording, like I like having like live instrumentalists or like live drums at least, because it really gives you that feel of that organic, like as you said before, feeling like you're jamming on a song.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like why you're in Nashville anyways, because you've got access to that whole live, like all these session musicians, all these like really talented, people who are playing instruments. right? Because that's the whole scene, right?
Yeah, absolutely. For sure.
So, yeah, so I mean, that's a lot of that vibe you're getting from that area. It's like I say, if you were in Austin and you were a blues guy, like a Stevie Ray Vaughan, you want to be in that kind of zone, or New Orleans, or you want to be like a New York kind of CBGB vibe, or like Berlin kind of Brian Eno vibe. Like certain scenes have, their kind of aspects of like, okay, that's what we're gonna get. Have you ever thought, like, after you're in the Nashville scene, that you'd want to go to London, or you want to go to Berlin, or you want to go to a different scene to kind of pick that vibe?
I have thought about LA. Um, I I grew up going to California a lot, so I'm very familiar. And my sister lives out there, so that definitely draws me to it. I think it's a really cool culture, and I do vibe with it a lot. I think my biggest decision with it was deciding between like LA or Nashville. Was Nashville's a smaller songwriting community. It's
Yeah.
you get in there, you write with them, like they want to hear your ideas. It's a little less like about management and cutthroat. Like
Yeah,
LA has
yeah. It
this.
seems like LA would be like New York, or London would be a lot harder.
Yeah, they have every industry there, where it's like Nashville's this small little southern town, and then suddenly it's all this music. Um
Yeah, kind of like Austin. It's got that kind of vibe. It's like an indie vibe.
yeah, yeah. Where like I love LA and I love New York, and I want to adventure there and spend time there with time, but I also think Nashville's just a great spot to be for songwriting. And it's a spot for me for now, that I think I can grow and learn from. I mean, I had never even been here before I moved here, and I just moved down here because I was like, this is songwriting town. This is Music City. Like, if I
Yeah.
if I can't make songs here, like, then what
Yeah.
else are you gonna?
Kind of like, if you're going, like Jack White, he put his stakes there, and it's kind of like Muscle Shoals, if you were
Yeah,
that kind of thing. There's a vibe. There's a certain vibe to certain towns,
absolutely.
like that. Musicians are drawn to. You had the Detroit vibe, the Motown vibe, the Stax vibe,
Yeah.
Sun Records vibe. Every kind of scene. I'm a big like fan of music
Oh, for
history.
sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's a big thing too, like with Nashville, is everybody assumes country music, and like that is what's pushed a lot. Like when you get to the airport, it is
Yeah,
country music. But there's a really big scene here of these young artists that are
yeah.
songwriting things that could be on the pop radio.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's cool because you got that Jack White, got Third Man there,
Yeah.
and you got the whole other, scene with a lot of these indie bands showing up. I think it's kind of like the new Austin, what
Yeah.
Austin was for a couple of years, maybe 10 years ago. It seems like Nashville is becoming like that, and that's cool because I think any kind of scene that's gonna, draw creative people, it's always what I've been into. I was kind of into like the Andy Warhol
Yeah.
Velvet Underground scene in New York.
Yeah.
That was kind of like my draw as an artist, is to kind of capture that.
That's cool. Yeah, no, I feel that very much.
And it's kind of seen it's going to kind of go that way and allow people to be experimental, allow people to come up with new things, and not just be totally pop oriented, but song oriented. It doesn't really matter. It's like as long as it's a good song in whatever genre it is, that's cool.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's my biggest thing, especially even like when I'm just writing, is I'm not thinking about who I'm writing it for or what genre it is, or I'm thinking about what am I feeling, what am I doing? This is what the song needs. And then after, I'll think of it more with like a business head of like, okay, I'll pitch this song, or oh, this is mine, or
Yeah.
when you're writing the song, it should be about like the feeling and the art and the making of it.
Yeah, I mean, some days like you're a musician and like you sit down and like in the genre that I'm in, some days I'll sit down and try to do like a Berlin Brian Eno thing.
Yeah.
And then the next day I'll try to do something like a Sun Ra thing. Then I'll go and I say, well, you know what? I like punk. I'm going to go back and do something like Who's to Do, or the Replacements, because that's what I'm in the mood to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kind of I like doing expansive sounds. What I'm about is like it's everything. So I'm not limited. If I want to do something jazzy or fusion or rock or punk or hip hop, I can kind of go wherever I want to go.
Yeah. Even just like the songwriting process, like if you have an idea, just get it out there, even if it's not a good idea or if it's a great idea. Put
Yeah.
it on a piece of paper or put it in a recording, and like at least you know you've done it and that like it's there, and if you don't ever use it again, then that's fine, but you tried.
Well, the whole thing with music today, with you can do found sounds, you can do field recordings, you
Yeah.
can do samples, because you could do something, right? And maybe it doesn't really fit where you are.
Yeah.
But then you go back to it and you say, wow, I could sample this, I could kind of turn it around, or I could take this and put it into another thing. And I was watching some documentaries on some artists, and I was watching like Frank Zappa.
Yeah.
Frank Zappa used to record like every concert he ever did. And then he would take all the reels, because this was back when everything was on reel to reel, right? He'd put them into his like living room, and then he kind of could listen to them on his headphones and say, well, this little bit from this concert in '68 goes good with this thing in '72, and he would come up with whole new songs.
That's cool.
By just reviewing his tapes,
his little
and
riffs and things like
yeah,
that.
and he'd find stuff. And Neil Young was famous for doing that too. I mean, a lot of what you hear on Tonight's the Night was on this big reel. It's on this big reel to reel he had. He had like 3 albums on the reel. He had Tonight's the Night, Time Fades Away, and On the Beach.
Yeah.
And they were all coming from these recording sessions that he had, and he kept on like trying to figure out which song went on which record. And he was just going, I was reading the documentary kind of biography of it, and it's really interesting how artists can kind of go back and mine their own work.
Yeah.
It's always good, like you said, to put it down, because you never know when you might want to come back to it. It might, create a whole new thing.
Absolutely. It could just spark a whole new idea. Like even if you just look at like one word and you're like, oh, that's weird. I thought of this in a completely different way. And then you suddenly have a new idea for it.
So I was just looking, I'm thinking about your song Siren. So this kind of brings up in my mind like Odysseus and some kind of like going to the island. And is it that kind of vibe where you're kind of bringing up the mythology, or it's a different type of siren?
In a sense, it is like the classics, like sirens in the ocean, like steering the sailors.
Yeah.
It's referring to that, but also just tying it into like just having that internal feeling in your gut, or like in your soul, feeling that you need to be called like just somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like that feeling like when a siren would sing to a sailor, like they couldn't help but just go with where it was calling them.
So you got this kind of ocean vibe.
Yeah.
What made you get into that kind of feeling of the sirens in the ocean and kind of getting pulled into this kind of seafaring journey?
Yeah, I've always liked siren. I mean, like people have called me that just out of like fun little names. So I think that kind of clicked in with me. And then also it was during quarantine. I went to stay with my sister in California, and she and I were walking to the beach at night, and I brought my guitar, and we were sitting there, and I came up with this chord progression while we were sitting there, and I was just staring out, and it was like just before sunset, and I was talking to her about like life and our common experiences, and just being like, what do you think about this? Or like, how would you put this into words? Like this feeling that you and I both share, like how would you put it into words? And it kind of just got me thinking about this subject, and just like feeling like something was pulling you to where you needed to be, and not really having a full explanation for it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Sometimes songwriting is like that. You kind of have the muse, you get this idea. You kind of, as an artist, I think we're kind of in tune compared to like people who aren't like creators. Like people who are creators, they kind of are in tune to their surroundings, and they're in tune to their feelings, and they are able to take all those inputs from inside and outside and turn it into something creative, whether it's painting or acting or music. And it's hard to explain to people who don't have that they're more like, well, they wish they had it, but they don't have it. And like you find that it's hard to kind of verbalize.
Absolutely.
That moment that you have that spark.
Yeah, I think everybody has creativity in them, but yeah, I think like me being able to write my songs is my way of expression. I feel like overall I'm a super positive, like outwardly bubbly person. But internally, like when I'm writing my music, I'm talking and I'm thinking about the things that are going through my head and that I wouldn't just talk to a regular person about. It's my outlet, and it's a topic that, you know, like I wanted to discuss and that I wanted to write a song about, but I had never quite found the right words or the right time to discuss that. And then put it into the song, and it really clicked with me. I suddenly was like, oh, I said it. Like I said what I needed to say about that, which is great.
But I think that's the great thing about songwriting, because songwriting, unlike a novel, it's kind of like a film. It's like a sonic film or a sonic sound painting. What I like about the art form is that you can, you know, because I was into poetry before I became a musician. And then I was always like, okay, well, how could I really connect these words to make it more cinematic? Yeah. And then I said, well, wow, I can actually combine it with my musical ability. And then suddenly the poems started merging into songs, because poems aren't exactly songs. They can become the base of a song. Yeah. But songs have to be structured a little differently to work with the music.
Yeah, yeah. Even like Stevie Nicks, like she wrote most of her music as like poems or like as a just written form, and then they turned them into music.
Yeah, I mean, it's fame. I mean, a lot of stuff. I grew up, you know, with Victorian poetry was like my favorite. I read all this Tennyson, and then the Harlem Renaissance. I read a lot of stuff from there. But it was like William Blake was like a big draw for me in the Victorian period, because his poems are, unlike a lot of Victorians like Wordsworth or Tennyson. Yeah, they're simple, like Tiger, Tiger, how feel for thy symmetry. They're not that complex.
Yeah, they just
they work really good as like songs. I mean, they work good as like the basis of like thinking about how to write a song. And I was like, wow, I really liked his form of poetry. Yeah. And then I started like diving into it and said, well, how can I take that kind of Blakean thing and put it into electronic music?
Yeah, I love that you have that appreciation for it. And it's also like, that's a big thing too, even just moving down here, is just learning different people's songwriting process has been really fun, because some people do want to start with their poetry, or do want to start with just a song seed and just like a title of a song and go from there. Where for me, I really like having like the backing music or chords or some sort of melody going into it. Because I feel like music has such strong emotion and feeling behind it as it is, just instrumentally. Yeah. The music, like you adding words you're speaking for the song like this, but the song already speaks for itself. Your words are adding to the beauty of the song, and kind of like combining the two, rather than just like, oh, I need to write this song because words.
It was interesting. I was watching a documentary. I've been, you know, kind of in lockdown, right? So yeah. I was watching this thing about Elton John and Bernie Taupin. Yeah. And Elton John was like really in sync with Bernie, right? Yeah. And that he would have all these great like piano lines, like some of the greatest piano lines in rock and roll. You know, like Billy Joel and Elton have like these really good chord arrangements and melodies. And Elton couldn't write lyrics. He wasn't like he admitted that he's like, I'm not very good at lyrics, but I'm really good at doing all these chord arrangements and all these melodies. And then when he got with Bernie, he was able to kind of interpret that and figure out where to put his piano lines. Just naturally figure out how to do it, and it just worked.
Oh, I think it's super cool. I think that's honestly part of my favorite parts about co-writes is getting different people's skills and just combining them together, like the way that they did.
Yeah, because that's kind of like the old school way of doing music from the 50s. In the 40s and the 30s, there was never a thought there would ever be a singer-songwriter. You always had like lyricists and maybe musicians, and the lyricists would, you know, they'd be working with Frank Sinatra, working with all these like, you know, crooners. And it was never thought that somebody could go and do, you know, what happened in the 70s with, you know, Carole King and, you know, all the singer-songwriters, Dylan, this idea that you could actually do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
and that's been the big draw to me ever since I'm a child of the 70s, was this whole, I was in the era of the singer-songwriter growing up.
Yeah.
And that always was the big draw. And it's kind of interesting today that you have this kind of like big producer thing going on again. That's kind of like the 50s where you got a lot of people being that have all these ghostwriters and producers, and not as much singer songwriter on certain genres.
Yeah, it
Where
definitely
that's
does
kind of
depend
come
on the
back.
genre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like where you are though, you're still in that kind of traditional, like, after the Beatles, after Sgt. Pepper, you get this, late 60s into the 70s, the era of the singer-songwriter.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I personally believe that I was born in the wrong era and that I was supposed to be friends with all of those people.
Yeah, I feel that way myself. I was like, I was, as a kid, I was trying to break in my 20s.
Yeah.
In all the bands I had in my 20s, I didn't hit anywhere, but I kept at it, and now I actually am doing better now than I did then.
That's
But it's like, I just kept on trying, but like I was always like, wow, I wish I could have jumped on that fire, but not that I didn't try.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, I get that. I just, the whole perspective on music and life and not having cell phones and social media, makes a difference.
Well, yeah, then you're just playing in some pizza shop, or you're playing in a bar, doing cover band stuff, trying to get an indie record label to pick you up. And now today, like with the social media, suddenly, like you can hit, like, my audience now, I can hit like all over the world.
Yeah.
I'll go and look on my SoundCloud, and there are people in Tokyo, sending me notes saying they like what I'm doing. There's people in Israel saying they like what I'm doing. People in Venezuela. You're like, wow. It's like I never could have imagined in 76 or 74 that I'd be hitting people in these other countries.
That's great. I mean, yeah, there's some really beautiful upsides to it and also some downsides, but
Yeah.
like just with like streaming and other things like that. But it's pretty amazing how, like, in a time where we are supposed to be in isolation, we can still communicate with people in different time zones.
Yeah, I mean, I end up talking to people in Europe. I mean, a lot of the bands I interview are from like Germany and the Netherlands and Sweden, and it's just like those scenes are really dynamic.
Yeah.
I've been talking to a lot of people like in the Nordic countries. There's a big kind of synth wave indie rock thing going on, and there's a lot of really cool, interesting bands that I probably would have never thought about if it wasn't for the way the social media is now.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Being able to connect with all these bands, it's like my college radio. Back when I was a kid, I found out about REM because the college I went to had a kid, running the radio station. He loved Michael Stipe. He loved REM. He's playing all these deep, early REM tracks, and I'm like, wow, who are these guys? And I found out about the Athens scene, which was a big kind of thing in Georgia. That whole Athens scene was like, very indie oriented. A lot of cool stuff coming out of that, and now you can go on to all these like SoundCloud, you go on to all Facebook, you go on to YouTube, you see it on TikTok, you see all these bands that you never would have heard before.
Yeah. Although I will say, I mean, there's beauty to that, absolutely. But there also is that struggle being a musician and having there be so much access in which your videos can be drowned out by literally every other person's, and just like the struggles of being a modern musician as well, of music companies won't look at, like, management companies or distribution won't look at you until you have over a certain amount of followers, or like things like that, or they won't listen to your songs or watch your videos until you have a certain amount of subscribers or streams. And it's interesting to see the A&R process of just like, you have to have established yourself before you can be established, in a sense. Whereas before, like with Clive Davis as an example, like they would take you and groom you and work with you. And there's beauty to that because they really did work with these people and give a finished product. But also, like, you talk about like rights and owning your songs and like having the power of you being your own artist is like another side of it.
Yeah, it's a whole flip thing, because it's like, if you if you don't, if you have this kind of new gate, in a way, like there's this ability to get out there, but there's still a gate because you don't get the full A&R treatment unless you're hitting a certain number, right?
Yeah,
but
you have to do that all on your own, and it's like unless you're paying for some sort of advertisements or it can be a struggle. Like you have to work at it every day, like a full-time job.
Yeah, because you're basically having to do your own kind of payola.
Yeah.
Because you got to get on these playlists, you got to get to these editors, you got to get to all the people. People.
Yeah, and it's like, you write your song, you have to produce your song, you have to advertise your song. Like there's so many more steps to it than I think even like other musicians have like never knew before they did it, or just like people listening might not know like all the things that musicians or other artists will put into their work before it even sees the light of day.
Well, yeah, from to getting a recording engineer, to getting a mastering service, to getting a PR, to getting a booking agent, to getting somebody to figure out the SEO, to get you on all the social media and getting you like into all the playlists and all the places that you need to get to. So yeah, I mean that's the whole reason I kind of got into podcasting is I found this was a way to kind of broaden my base.
Yeah.
Because people find out about my band, but then because I talk to people, and that becomes kind of even bigger than my music. But now, I've gotten some opportunities from it where I've gotten like little label deals, like a Swedish label is going to be putting out a 3-song EP for me in a couple of weeks. So, sometimes you can get deals if you're doing something just to get yourself out there. And doing this, I think, is something that I kind of like, well, this isn't really taken away from my music because connected me with other musicians, and it's always been really cool to be able to have this connection, especially in this lockdown period, to be able to talk to creators all over the world. That's been a real big help for me.
Absolutely. Even just getting ideas from other artists, or just feeling like understanding that they feel the same way you do, like those things are actually really helpful for musicians, because sometimes you can feel kind of alone when you're doing a path that's very uncharted. So it can be really fun to talk with other musicians and be like, oh yeah, we're all doing this, like we're all going through it.
Yeah, especially in this kind of time where we don't know where we're going to be playing shows and stuff, and to be able to have this kind of conversation, because the thing about being a creative, like you have your family, you have your friends that aren't creative people, and they might be supportive, but it's like it's hard to talk to people about music that aren't musicians.
It can be.
It can be sometimes. And if you got people who are kind of music fans and they like to hear about, you got a best friend that likes to hear your demos, that's always cool.
Yeah.
But if you got like the average kind of person, like wants to talk about football or baseball or whatever, doesn't want to hear about like the intricacies of your songwriting, and if you're kind of hitting a roadblock or you're suddenly excited. I find myself I was excited because I put together some kind of Moog bass line, it had this kind of Coltrane feel, and like nobody's gonna understand that except another like synth player.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you try to talk to somebody, they're like, "Oh, what?"
Yeah. Even like with me, like going to Berklee College of Music for my freshman year of college, it's pretty different than a regular person's college experience. Like most people are going to football games and going to frat parties and doing that, where like I'm like, I had a live concert in a basement for my Friday night parties, or like things like that. Or just like having conversations and having somebody randomly sing out the lick like do re mi fa re te do, and it's like any normal person would think that we were like aliens to this planet. But because we are the way that we are, we can talk about it and kind of understand the perspectives. But
so are you able to still connect with a lot of your classmates that like if you run into a situation where you're with like the kind of like average person crowd that's not going to want to get that deep, do you have the ability to still connect with a lot of your alumni? Oh, did we lose you again? Oh no, I think I lost you again. Okay, we'll try this again. Hey, got you again.
Hi. Yeah, that was a weird one. I still heard you. You were like, "Oh, we lost you," and I like could still hear you, but you couldn't hear me. So
Yeah, sometimes because of the pandemic, the connections have been somewhat stressed because so many people are home.
yeah.
So this for some reason, I don't know if there's a bug going on with the app, but yeah, we'll keep on going.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I was that kind of asking about whether or not you still have connections to your Berklee alum.
Yeah, I have tried to stay in touch with all of the people that I was friends with or that I had met directly. Even some of like the people that were like older than me, but like were still killing it in the game. I've messaged and been like, "Hey, do you want to do some cover songs?" So I've actually got a couple people lined up that I'm going to do some cover songs with that are like elsewhere, and we're going to do virtual videos and stuff like that. And then I do have like my like friends or like my trusted musical confidants that I will send stuff to and be like, "Hey, what do you think of this mix?" Or
Yeah,
"What are your thoughts on this?" Because I think it's really important to get people who you trust and people who like understand where the vision is
yeah.
going and what it will be. So I do that. And even just like seeing some of my friends that like I haven't seen in a year or so, will be like, "Hey, I'm visiting Nashville," and I'll give them a tour around and kind of tell them like what life outside of Berklee is like, especially in Nashville.
So it must be really, really cool to have a like-minded musical friend that, like, if you send them a mix, they can give you that kind of, Berkeley-informed opinion.
Oh yeah.
That's pretty deep because I mean I've got a bunch of friends I played in bands,
Mm-hmm.
over luckily now I'm in my 50s, so I got like 20 years of people I played with. But they're having that kind of musician point of view
Yeah,
is really important as a musician, because you just send it to somebody who's kind of like, yeah, that's great, and they're like, okay, that doesn't really tell me. That doesn't
yeah.
really tell
I
me.
refuse that option. I know not to send it to certain people because I'm like, if you're not going to tell me the truth, then why am I sending it?
Yeah, that
If
doesn't
I
really.
wanted to be told good job, then I'll send it to you once it's done.
Yeah. Yeah, you want somebody to tell you like, okay, well, this outro or this like chorus or what you're doing here could be different if you did these, changes. Maybe you need to change the chords, or you need to change the tuning, or you change
It
this.
helps so much. Even
Yeah.
if you're like, even when I'm like working with a professional producer, I will still send it to like one of my friends from Berklee who,
Mhm.
he and I actually met on our flight from Salt Lake City to Berklee. We had never met before, but we both got in and we're moving there on the same night.
Oh wow.
And kind of just became friends from there. And I trust his ear, and I'll send him stuff, and I'll be like, "Hey, I'm working with this like a professional studio, but like, I feel like something's missing. What would you add?" Or
Yeah.
getting his inputs just on like the mix. It's been it's nice because I think sometimes you can show a song to somebody. Like I'll play like a song just me and an acoustic guitar, and they'll be like, "Oh, okay, so just like a singer-songwriter song," and I'm like, well, yes, but like also there's so much more potential if you could imagine what the production or what the piano or what the thing is going to sound like. But it's like, how can you imagine what a sound is? And in my brain, like that's just so explainable to me,
Yeah.
because that's just how my brain has always worked. Is there are melodies in my head and I must get those melodies out.
Yeah, that's the cool thing about being, a musician is like, I was watching again the documentary on George Martin, and George Martin was talking about, like, I could have recorded the Beatles like they were playing in Berlin,
Yeah.
and that would mean it would be a Xerox of a live performance. But I decided I want to look at him like the way Monet looks at painting, and he said his technique in the studio was to be like a sound painter. So I mean, I don't necessarily want it to sound like it would if they were playing live in Berlin. It's what it could be on an album, which means it can be interpreted, and it's going to have all these colors and all this stuff, which is kind of the idea of sound paintings, which Hendrix also talked about.
Yeah.
What I always was very interested in that, as a synthesis, because a lot of what we do is all this layering of all these like tones, and it kind of comes from this idea of like that you can create a sound painting.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's kind of what music gets when you get into production. it's that layering that gives you the levels, of the art. It gives you the colorization of your music, which you then can kind of becomes like cinematic.
Absolutely, yeah. Just even like changing a tone of a guitar can change an entire feeling of a song, and it's like it's so minute, but it's so important.
Yeah, if you throw like a space echo onto a guitar, then you get something that's that kind of like a Lana Del Rey kind of dream pop.
Yeah.
If you put like a chorus on something, or you put a heavy delay or a real spring reverb, like a physical spring reverb rather than a digital one, there's all kinds of things you can do in music. I mean, I've been playing with this Moog that actually has a physical spring reverb. And when you put tones in it, even if it's a monophonic tone, it has the weight of a chord because it does all these harmonics on it. And when you play with it, it gets this really kind of deep, kind of dream like atmosphere that you can do with this stuff. And that's kind of like why I love analog, is the level of stuff you can do with the LFOs and all these other things. But just the sound creation aspect of sound design is part of like being a synthesis. Is half of what we do is the design of the sound before we even get to the song.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, you're just laying down the soundscape and the vibe of the.
Yeah. So I understand what you're doing, and it's interesting. You're kind of a guitar focused, but a lot of the artists you name check have this kind of dream atmospheric sound. It's very progressive rock like. I can kind of hear Genesis and Yes and Emerson, Lake and Palmer in that kind of sound, which kind of comes from that progressive rock, that kind of classical mix with jazz. Of what those artists did, and I'm still enamored with that stuff today.
Absolutely. Oh, I know. If a song is good, it does not matter to me when it came out, who's it by, anything. It's just like it's a good song. I will love it.
Yeah, so it's just it's interesting that you'd be able to keep on doing what you're doing. You've got Siren. Was it coming out Friday?
Yep, coming out Friday. So yeah, if you guys follow me on social media, it's just Angela_Wright, and it's got links to my pre-save of the song, and
we're gonna
I'll be releasing the video the following week too.
We're putting the pre-save links on this podcast so people will be able to click that. And we're going to put that out. We also now have a blogger page on GoDaddy that we run just a brief like recap of or the details and all the hyperlinks, and we push that out to get a greater push, kind of like the way we do our highlight on Instagram, where it goes right to the Spotify podcast. Then we're able to include all your Linktree stuff and all your website information on the GoDaddy. So we'll push that out. We'll send you that. We're really happy that you're still out there doing work, and we're glad that you're in this. You're still in the creative zone.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope that we can all, as musicians and artists and supporters of the musicians and artists, like just continue creating and enjoying all the music that we can.
Yeah, I think people should just continue to be as creative as possible. I think like you can get caught up in the news and get caught up in all the kind of bad vibes happening right now, but then there's still a lot of good stories in this time, even though there's a lot of heaviness going on. I think the art helps everybody get through, like you said.
Absolutely. I mean, if it's a struggle that you're going through, why not express it through an art form that speaks to you?
Well, I'm glad you went back to Nashville and you're still working on music. Are you working on bigger or more projects after?
So after this song comes out on Friday, and then the video, and then I will hopefully be releasing. The goal is to do like a song a month. Kind of following this, but we shall see. Obviously it's been difficult getting into the studio amidst a pandemic, and then finding out like plans like that. But yeah, that's kind of the goal and the dream, is to release this song and see how it does. And if people want more, I'll do an EP, or if we just want singles by singles, then that's how it'll be.
Well, I'd love to talk to you when you have more work to do. If you want to do like another episode, we have some more stuff coming, and whether it's the EP or singles, like we're in a mode where we're doing a lot of podcasts, so we have a lot of room in our schedule to do that, because we just open it up to do as many as we can.
Great. Yay. Okay, well, I'm super excited. I hope that we can share each other's dreams.
Well, yeah, I think we're going to keep on pushing this out. Our audience level has hit over 25,000 listeners now wide, so we're happy. We're trying to push to hit over 30,000 this year. You know, our overall goal is to hit like 50,000 to 100,000 listeners for this podcast. And so we're you know, steadily doing better than when we first started with our first 3,000. Now we're at 25. So we're hoping that, you know, we can continue that trend.
Great. Well, I'm so excited for you. This will be an exciting chapter for us all.
Yeah. Well, it's just helping everybody. You know, we feel that being able to give musicians a voice and get it out there is a cool thing to do, because, you know, in a world where there's so many people out there trying to get musicians to pay for different things. That in the world where you do a full length interview and give, you know, independent bands trying to make it a voice and get their audience to hear them.
We appreciate
in a different way.
We appreciate it more than you will ever know, and I think you know that as being a musician is just any conversation and any connection that you can make as far as music is concerned, I am happy to be a part of. So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
We'll continue to do so as long as you have more and more songs to give to people. And we're happy that you've got this new song coming out on Friday. We want everybody to go and hit the pre-save to Siren Call that we're going to put out here, and listen to it wherever you want to. But we're on Spotify, so maybe you listen to it. Yeah, we're a Spotify company, so we're going to say that. But,
follow me on
okay,
Spotify.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much for being on. We're going to push this out. You'll see the links within an hour.
Thank you so much. Super excited. Bye.
Bye. Have a good night.